Let's see. Mm, all right, let's jump into it. Features. So these things move in cycles, right? So yesterday it was oversold here, and we clearly saw this thing. We took an opportunity. The internet stopped. Lost your mic.
No, you're good now.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. So yeah, futures bouncing. Since yesterday, this is where we took. I got involved here when it was crossing this 3991 on futures. I got involved with SVX. We saw in a minute we'll get into that all that Microsoft and Apple and all that. But this is where essentially I got an entry. The idea was to ride it all the way up, and while it was hitting probably here, right about here, this is where I think I took off about 4,000 or something like that. This is where I got off the trade. Uh, should have held that trade, but you know. I exited the trade. But after hours, again, once it crossed the 50 moving average, here I got involved and exited around here, I think, somewhere about here in the morning. So the idea, why did I exit? Because this thing was getting overbought here, clearly, right? And it gave way to the downside. However, one thing I still noticed that it hasn't violated the second standard deviation on the hour. And the trade could have been, it. I could have been in this trade for a little bit longer, but it is what it is. Fine, exited the trade, and expectation now is that it could remain overbought for some time, but still the expectation is that for it to cross to the downside, the SMI has crossed to the downside here. Very likely it will take the push to the downside, especially if it breaches below the 8, which it is right now bouncing. And I'll show you what why am I still looking for 20 points up. So the expectation here for it to come back into 5, it is bouncing off of the 8, and if it does come back below the 8 and breach the 8, then we'll look for a push all the way down here into this number, just about 40.22. So that's about 15 points from where we are right now. So 15-point downside, probably 15-point upside, or 15 to 20 points to the upside. So that's the trade right now. So if it breaches below 40.22, then expecting it to come back all the way down here at 40.14. And definitely not plotting anything sub the 200 moving average on the hour. That's about 39.97 area. So that's from where it is right now. That's a good 1 percentage point to the downside, 39.97, give or take 40 points from where it is right now, right? So that's the and definitely not plotting anything sub here. But for some reason, if it starts to come back down, sub 1% from where it is right now, then very likely it's going to go hit this number 39.88 and 39.72. So this is the downside path, and the upside path, you got to go here, right? So this is what is happening. It is hitting the one standard deviation here, taking a breather. So I think there is nothing here which says overbought or anything, any red signs here. MACD is still crossed to the upside. So I'm expecting it to come back up and probably hit the zero line, please, before dipping down. Why would it dip down? We'll look into that as well. So hitting the one standard deviation, taking a breather just the way it should. Now the idea for it is to come back and test this number. And if that clears, it will come back here. And this is what I was putting in my note, 40.45, 40.46. That clears, very likely it's going to go hit this number right here at 40.57 area. So this is the idea here. And very likely if it hits this 40.57 area, then very likely it will take a breather to the downside. By the time it hits this number, very likely it will come back all the way here again. RSI will be hitting the top, and likely it will This is how it behaved last time. Expecting, if not a full push to the downside, very likely it'll take a breather, probably come back into the one standard deviation, and probably come back into the 100 moving average again for around 40.20. That breaches, you know the drill, right? This line breaches, come back into this line. That line breaches, come back into the next five, next eight. Then very likely end up somewhere around here at the 200 moving average or at the mean. Yesterday, the mean reversion did happen, and it came back down and pushed up. And it did not violate the second standard deviation yet. So very likely the chances are bright that it'll continue to move to the upside in this jagged manner, right? But still, the push is still to the upside. I think the clear trade was here when it was oversold and could have gone long. Obviously, I did not go long. I was trading, uh, without my proper setup, so I did not go, heavy long or anything like that. I was taking trades, but very small trades. I was traveling this week. But yeah, so the idea is still there. Yesterday was a very good day. Expected move was to the upside. We got that move. And so today, very likely again 40-40, 40-40 clears, 40-46 area, then the 50 moving average on the a daily. That clears, then we'll look for further upside. If not, we'll just leave it alone until this is the range, right? To the upside, about 40.57. Downside is about 39.97 area, wherever this is, right about here. So if this breaches the about 39.95 area, basically the 200 moving average, then we'll look for the mean reversion again, 39.91 area. But I don't think this is for today. Probably for tomorrow, right? Tomorrow we have GDP print coming in, and then day after tomorrow we have the PCE data coming in. So yeah, watch for that. Cool thing. Now next is I'm not really getting into this chart. This chart will keep in a reserve, as and when it need arises, we'll come back and look into this chart. Right. This is more important, I think. Apple. Yesterday we were looking at Apple, and we knew that it violated the second standard deviation. We knew that it was overbought. We knew that it had to take a breather, and the cleaner path was for it to hit the five, hit the eight. If it breaches below the eight, then we were looking for further downside. It did not close below eight yesterday, but still the idea is still for it to come back down and test the eight, especially if the MACD crosses to the downside. This is what I'm watching. With the move up yesterday and today, probably this cross will be avoided as of now, and this has come out of the overbought zone. I'm still thinking that it needs to come back down, but we'll see. And this is bouncing because here, where is that chart? Here, right? Yesterday we were watching this chart throughout the day. Throughout the day we were watching this chart. Got overbought, oversold, and we were looking for a bounce. We got our bounce, especially it cleared this line right here, 156.70 area. Then we got a nice push to the upside. So this is what we were counting on yesterday, and this is where once it came back down, my stop loss got hit here at 157.50. But after hours, I tried getting into this thing because there was still, this move to the upside. I'm still thinking that, there is a little bit more to the upside. Probably at the open, it might go up and hit this number, 159 or 159.50, 159.60 area. Hoping for that. But by the time it hits that number, very likely it'll get overbought here, right? So yeah, so expecting a decent chop kind of a day. And if Apple starts to move to the upside in real time, we will see where that is, and then very likely we'll take a trade based on that. Let's go here on this chart. This chart is still suggesting that Apple has room all the way up till here at about 165.40 area, and um, I think with everything that is going on with Apple yesterday, consumer confidence, and also I think Apple rolled out a new product yesterday, pay later or something like that. uh, so yeah, I think it is still there. I think it is still there. So 165.40 area, I think it is still there. And we will watch this range to the downside again, right about till here, 156.50 area. That breaches the fives all the way here on the week at about 155.30 area. This is what we're watching, and it's unclear. It's unclear to trade Apple today. Yesterday, these moves are, this is where I make most of my money, right? Either it gets oversold or it gets overbought. So we knew pretty much with a certainty that it would at least come back into the 5 and 8. And if it's from going from the downside, we knew it would come back into the 5 and 8. So this is pretty much a certainty, right? If 8 clears, then very likely it's going to go hit the mean reversion. So that's pretty much a certainty. So this is where I make most of my money. And right now that trade is gone. So I'll be cautious with this. So let's say if it hits here and starts to come back down. Again, the downside here is about 158.70, 158.75, the 50 moving average on the hour. And then that breaches, then likely the 5, then likely the 8. And the mean reversion is sitting all the way down here at 157.60, 157.65 area, right? So this is to the downside, this is the path. To the upside, very likely you can expect 159.60 area. So give or take about another 60 cents. That clears, we'll start to reassess the thing into the second standard deviation about 160.20 area, right? So by the time it goes here or here, you can clearly see this thing will get really oversold here. So it might remain oversold for a bit, like it did here, but again, the cycle needs to take place and we need to come back down. This is how normal market functions. Cool thing. Right. So let's get into a bit of DXY. DXY is bouncing. Uh, and same thing, five clears. Yesterday we were looking for a five clears, then it's gonna go hit the 8. Now the because the oversold conditions were prevailing on the lower time frame for Apple and we'll get into Microsoft in a bit. So Microsoft, Tesla, oversold conditions were prevailing for that. So we got the technical bounce, but look at this thing. This thing is moving higher. Very likely, if it clears the 8, then that will start to create some pressure on the tech, right? So and the 10-year is also moving to the upside, and very likely what the market is seeing right now is that and we'll look into 10-year in a minute. uh, Very likely the market is looking at end of a hiking cycle. That is exactly what this is looking at. The 10-year moving lower, the yields are moving lower. So the market forward looking is saying that the uh, if even if the Fed is not going to cut rates, the Fed is not going to hike rates, right? That's exactly what this is predicting here. So that's why it is stalling. It's coming back down, even with 25 bips last FOMC, and I think this FOMC still is expected about 25 bips, and probably we are looking at a pause after that. Unless everything, unless all the bank crisis kind of calms down, which looks like it is calming down for the moment, and unless that whole commercial real estate kind of starts to come, the maturity starts to happen with that debt. Unless that happens, I think it's okay, and then probably we'll see something around summer. That's when more of the leases come due and all that stuff to be renewed and all that. So that's when we'll see probably some of the real estate, commercial real estate, start to come down, and some of that turmoil probably will seep into banking sector. But bear in mind that most of this commercial real estate is owned by private equity, right, or the private organizations. So that's where I think even if the stress comes into play, I think the stress will be divided, or what do you call, pushed into the private equity. It will not be probably it will not be visible to people in the public markets. So that's the hope there, at least. And probably the banks. There are not many public banks which are actually exposed by and large with the commercial real estate. So, and that's a story for summer. So we'll bother about it when the summer rolls around. Cool thing. For now, I think if it starts to move up beyond the 5, then expect it to hit the 8. Probably this will put some pressure. This should put some pressure on the what do you call this thing, on the markets, SPX, right? So, and if I'll start to take this thing seriously, if it clears the 8, then very likely 8 would be probably about 107.97. It is right now. If that clears, very likely we're expecting it to hit this 103.49, 103.50 area, the 50 moving average on the daily. That's the idea there. Now, why is that? Let's go here. And this thing is bouncing, fair enough. And this thing right here, this is about to cross, right? So once this crosses, very likely it will push the interest rates or the 10-year above this line here, 3.62, and expecting a mean reversion about 3.68 area, right? 3.67, 3.68, or probably about 3.7 area. So this needs to happen, and very likely this will happen, and probably we'll see another breather here at about 3.62 area, and that clears, very likely the mean reversion will happen. So today, if it happens today, well and good. I think it should happen. If not today, then tomorrow. We again tomorrow is GDP print, so probably we'll see how the GDP print works, and the GDP number is up, and then very likely you'll see this thing move higher, and probably hit this number. And if this number clears, very likely it's going to go hit this number, 3.76 area. Cool. So that should pull DXY up, and that should put some pressure on the tech. So if you have tech under pressure, then very likely you'll have indices under pressure. Right. So this is what I'm looking at on the hourly chart. Looks like it'll take a breather here. If it clears here, expect it to move up all the way to here, 102.73 area. Very likely it'll end up somewhere about here. And if this clears, then clearly we are looking at a mean reversion. Where is that? US 10. Mean reversion right about here for US 10. Cool thing. Now, let's get a little bit into yesterday's trade here with Microsoft. Right, so this is what similar to Apple yesterday's trade, right, and moved higher. 5 8, same thing. This is nothing new. Over gets oversold, and these things work in cycles. Overbought, oversold. Now the next problem. Next will be overbought conditions again. If the overbought conditions prevail, and Apple and Microsoft start to move lower, then the indices will start to move lower. Nothing new. So probably Microsoft will hit this number 2.78 to 2.79. That clears, very likely it will push all the way into 280 or something like that. By the time it gets here, I think it'll get overbought again. And very likely, if the SMI crosses to the downside, then very likely we'll take a push to the downside. That's the upside path. And the downside, same thing, just as Apple, hitting the 50 moving average. We'll look for another bounce here, about 277. That breaches about the 8, that breaches about the 100 moving average, that breaches about the mean reversion is here about 275 40 area. Hoping for this to hold for a bit at least. If that breaches, then we'll start to reassess the situation, probably into this number 271 to 72 area, right? Yeah, 272 area. Cool. So yeah, so Apple and Microsoft, whichever way these two go, probably I don't trade Qs, or I don't trade any other ticker. But if you are into that, rather than trading a spy, or probably if you see more correlated names are from Nasdaq, right? So if you see the what is this thing? Apple and Microsoft move in a certain direction, including Tesla. Trade Qs, and then if you're into a Q trade, probably we can chart that one as well. I don't chart it because I don't trade Qs, or I don't trade Qs anymore. But definitely look into that. Right, yesterday's trade was a decent trade on TQs. I took that trade a little bit, but that was an equity trade. But that turned out to be a good one. But if you're trading options on Qs, uh, yeah, the Apple and Microsoft correlation will always help with that trade, right? Because those are more correlated to the Qs, and probably less correlated, or at least in this case, because of the real estate making a trying to make a comeback along with financials, because the 10-year was moving down. So yeah, trade that if you're into that. Cool thing. Let's get Microsoft here. Another thing, right? So Microsoft bounce, fair enough. This is what I'm watching for Microsoft, right? So this is what I'm watching with Microsoft and Apple. Same thing. The MACD. Right? If MACD today with the move higher, very likely it will avoid this cross to the downside. But again, I'm watching this trade. If this crosses to the downside, very likely I'll take this trade to the downside on Microsoft and Apple as well. Or rather, if you are into Qs or SQs, you can take the trade as well. Cool thing. Uh, this chart probably not in play as of now. However, just like Apple, watching this trade 286 to the upside, Apple has about I think 165. Same thing, just there's a super trend going on here. That very likely when it hits this number, very likely people are going to short this thing. And to the downside, the 100 moving average right here, 276 20 area, that breaches the 5 is down here at 269.70. Very likely this 5 will move up at least a little bit here to 271 272 area, so that should be if it comes back down and breaches the 100 moving average here, then very likely it'll come back into this 272 area. Although, as of now, I don't believe that's the case. As of now, very likely we are still watching this thing go up. Very likely there is a short covering coming into picture. By the way, I don't know if anybody took this trade, worked out as expected, right? So, ESM, I'm still in this trade. I'm still holding for this 50 to get tested, but very short leash right now. Hitting this number, clearing this number, very likely it's going to hit this number about 40 46 area. That clears, very likely we are going to push into this number, right? Cool thing. So that's what I'm watching right now. And another thing is oil. So oil, very likely we wanted to see, a couple of days back when we were charting, I think on Monday, we wanted to see a mean reversion. And by per thesis, if the mean gets tested, very likely it's going to go hit the upper inner Bollinger Band, which is sitting at about 74, 54, yeah, 74, 55 area. Very likely this will get tested and another breather perhaps. However, the MACD is still crossed to the downside yesterday or day before yesterday. We were watching this thing go up, and very likely it'll, if it clears this line here, very likely it's going to push all the way into 74.95, 75 area. And as long as you have oil stable, I think the market will stabilize alongside oil. Very likely a breather spot here, here, or here. uh, these will be breather spots. How deep of a breather we don't know, but still these are breather spots. And after the breather, very likely the MACD is still to the upside, so it will continue to the upside. And notable is that even though it is moving higher, MACD is crossed, all that is good. However, it has left the 5 here. The 5 is sitting all the way 72.36, and the mean is here at about 73.26. So expectation is that even if it hits this number or this number, very likely it will take a breather. I think it should come back and test the mean, or at least wherever this 5, probably the 5 will move higher, or come back into the mean about here at about 70, 72.30, 72.93 to 74. Probably that's the idea here for oil. It's that number, comes back down, tests the mean again, then bounces. I think that is a much better way for oil to move. So if oil comes back down, I think market will also come back down with oil. Then that will give us another decent entry spot. That I believe that's a much better way of looking at things. Cool thing. Tesla, right? We want to see Tesla, right? And if anybody is trading an index, it is imperative to watch this trade. Microsoft, it is absolutely important to watch this trade, right? Apple and Microsoft. Without this, you cannot really actually have a handle on any index in which you have Microsoft and Apple. Microsoft is a big part of the Qs, and Apple is a big part of S&P. So always keep an eye on these two. I'm insisting on that point because yesterday I got a DM from some person. Uh, that person seemed to have went deep with Qs or SQ trade, and that person is down about 17% on that trade and on equity. And yeah, if even if you're taking 100 shares of SQ and you're down 17%, that is a good. I think I don't know what $700-800. Yeah, it hurts. So don't do that. Don't do that. Even and if you got caught into that trade on the wrong side of it, immediately either don't go looking for averaging into it. Look for the opposite side of trade, right? SQ. If you are long SQ, then probably, and if you want to hold the SQ trade, and you are, and you think that you've caught the opposite side of trade, then go with the TQ. Right? Keep the SQ there and don't have to average that in. Just go with the opposite trade of TQs. So that way, you'll actually have something to show, instead of just averaging in with the SQs. Let's say yesterday's trade, for example, yesterday's trade. So if you were into SQs and if you averaged in, and then you're losing more on that. But if you kept that SQ trade and got into TQ trade, you made some money. You recovered some losses there, right? So that's the way you want to look at things. Cool. Uh, and that's what I asked that person to do. Right. So the idea for where is this trade? Tesla. So this was the Tesla trade yesterday, and I think yesterday I was saying that I'm not looking for anything sub 200 moving average on the hour for Tesla. Exactly worked out, bounced here, and also I am actually looking at a new chart here. Oh no, I didn't save it. Okay, so this is the new time frame that I've been working for a little bit now. Uh, and yeah, this is from India. So this is what I was super confident about with Tesla trade. Yesterday, I did not show this chart, but this is one of the charts that I'm working on, and right now it has the same what do you call these indicators, but on the other chart, which I'm actually watching, that has a couple of different indicators on that. So yeah, so this is why I was super confident about this Tesla trade, Tesla bounce. Same thing, 5 8 mean reversion, and then the next one, if it clears here, this should act as decent resistance. But if it clears here, then expecting it to go up all the way till here, 194.50 area, and very likely it'll take a breather about here. That clears, then we're looking forward for a push all the way into 196 area. Cool. Right about here, this is still the idea. If it clears here, this is still the idea for Tesla to get tested. Cool thing. And right here, so the upside still is 195 area for Tesla, and that clears. Then we're looking forward for the second standard deviation here, about 196 area. But this should act as decent resistance, the one standard deviation on the day. However, again with Tesla, same thing. Watching the MACD. With Apple watching the MACD, with Microsoft watching the MACD. If the MACD crosses to the downside, very likely it will pull things to the downside, right? So and probably this rally in the futures right now will stem just about here or just about here. And I will not be very quick to short these things beyond the 1 hour chart. 1 hour chart, of course, that's where I operate, the 1 hour chart, right? So based on that 1 hour chart, I will operate. I'll take a short trade if it gets overbought, but I will be very cautious because of this thing still cross to the upside, right? And if it crosses above the zero line here, then probably and puts will be in trouble, and probably short covering will start to come into picture. Then in a flash, you'll probably have yes hitting this 4096 area right about here, right? So watch for that. Watch for that. Keep a close watch on that. Right. So Tesla trade upside is still this number here, and the long-term trade probably to the upside is this. If MACD crosses to the downside, you can expect probably tomorrow, if GDP comes in hot, likely scenario is that US 10 will move higher, then very likely it'll start to come back down again into mean reversion. But the range here for the day probably looking at this number to the upside, 195.50 area, and the downside very likely is the mean at about 187. This is the range for the day. And long term looking, probably you're looking at the upside about 202, downside about 183. Same thing yesterday, from yesterday, about 20-point range. This chart is not really conclusive, so we don't want to pull this chart out just yet because of the range getting very tight here. Weekly charts don't really make sense, right? Because we still have to the upside. If you want, gotta clear this 202, then you gotta clear this number. Anyways, 1 minute to open. Let's get okay. It's opening. Let's get into live trading.